growth therapy.
Yay! Hi guys, it is me, Stefanie Maegan, your host of Growth Therapy, and we have a trauma therapist with us today, Anna Aslanian.
You got it.
Okay, I was so scared I was gonna fuck it up.
You're good.
So yeah,
Hi.
just before we begin, can you give us a little bit of a background on how you decided and became a trauma therapist?
So I always knew I wanted to be a therapist, like ever since teens. I don't know what that says about me. Probably nothing good.
Ever
but
since what?
I was a teen. I
Oh, a
already knew
teenager.
like I wanted to be something in the field of psychology.
Yeah.
Then I just wanted to go to school for general psychology, and then sort of work with different populations just to see what actually is my passion.
Right.
So I worked with, university counseling center with kids, worked at the chronic, like a hospital place as well with chronically mentally ill population, addiction. So I tried to like a lot of different things.
Right.
And, all of them were wonderful. And I landed on couples and a lot of individuals who have experienced trauma. Because I found that regardless if I was working with someone who's suffering from schizophrenia or addiction or, relationship problems, there was always something there that was trauma related.
Right.
And I really like to get to the root of the problems when possible, and it's just been, that's kind of started happening. And then you learn more and you just see wonderful results with clients.
Yeah.
Because you realize there is so much trauma that isn't really visible very easily, but that impacts the client. So that's kind of how I landed on trauma. And then with couples, it's just great to change that dynamic because it's like a domino effect. The next thing you know, it's like they're doing better individually. If they have kids, they're better parents and so on.
Yeah. And I have you here today because I've talked openly on the podcast about just how my traumas have affected my relationship. And I have my boyfriend Bryan here just to just to keep me accountable for certain things, especially if we talk about like our dynamic, just to, give his point of view.
Sure.
But yeah, like for me, just to jump right into it, I feel like, what would you say my issues? I would say like maybe I feel like everyone has a certain kind of trauma with their parents. And I feel like for me, like I mentioned earlier, I have ADHD. So I've always been a very kind of chaotic and messy person. And my mom, especially my mom, is the total opposite of that. Like she was just very organized. She's very, detailed, very book smart. I was more just kind of like to socialize. It wasn't really all about school. And so it was she was really hard on me, very like militant. And I'm also Filipino. So just growing up, just like, a child of an immigrant and also just the culture in general is just very strict. It really like affected my relationship with me and my mom. And so, and I feel like as I've gotten older, I feel like it's gotten a little bit better, but however, it still shows up in my relationship. Like when, for instance, my boyfriend and I, we fight a lot over chores. And because he's a lot like my mom, actually, and he's very organized. He cleans up after himself. Like he's the type of person that cleans every single day. And I'm like, how the fuck, like I'm just not that person.
Yeah.
And so when he comes home from work and he sees that there's mess done, we definitely get into that argument. And I find myself crying every single time because I feel like he's like a parent to me. And then he starts to feel like he's being a parent too because he's like, I'm seeing like teenage Steph come out, And so, but then I kind of see like his trauma come out too because he starts to like, no offense, Bryan, but he starts to throw a little bit of a tantrum because he doesn't really feel like he's being heard.
Yeah.
And in those moments, in like the heat of the moment, it's so hard to come up with how to like solve the issue. I feel like we just ended up being like emotional, and then it starts impacting everything else because it's like, what is it like when we have kids? Are we just going to be this angry again? It just, it kind of just keeps like building and building. And I think even in those moments, I'm like, fuck, I wish we had a therapist. Sorry, I cuss a lot. I wish we had a therapist to just guide us through this conversation because it's something that always gets brought up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, since the beginning of our relationship.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said so much right there already, and like it makes sense. I had everything you said makes complete sense.
Okay.
We pick partners who are similar to our parents. I'm sure you've heard that. Like, it's a thing people say, but it's true. And it's not so much about, you're picking someone who looks like your parent, right? It's not about the looks. It's more about the theme of the relationship and the dynamic, right? And there is a reason, right? We might not like how, let's say, might not like how your mom was, for example, right? But that was also what you knew. So it was familiar to you, right? So we always go towards what's familiar to us because we know that territory. We know how to manage and how to be with someone who says certain things or does certain things, right? So if your mom was like very clean and wanting to clean, it makes sense how you would also be with someone who does the same thing, right? Because it's familiar to you. It doesn't mean you have to like it, but it's just, that territory.
Exactly.
So that makes sense.
Yeah. And that tracks even just with like my exes too. They've always been very like clean and like organized. And I'm like, I always go for like clean organ, which is nice because it's like I'm not, but then it's always something that's like a battle in a relationship because I'm just like, like I just want my freedom, and then to have someone be like, why'd you do the dishes? And then give you an attitude for it.
Well, this is the thing, right? I think, an important thing for couples generally to know is that when we choose a partner, we choose a set of problems. There is no such thing as like you pick the right partner and it's just wonderful. You will not have fights and you'll get along and it'll be just happily ever after, right? Doesn't exist, right? Every person has something, right? Unless we copy paste ourselves. And even then, we probably wouldn't get along with ourselves, right? So it's really about, how do I manage this conflict that comes up over our differences? So research shows that 69% of what couples argue about is not solvable. And when I say this, couples are like, why am I in couples therapy? Like, this is not good, right? 69% is pretty high. But and that's due to our differences as people, how we've been brought up, how our brain processes things. You mentioned ADHD, right? We are just different people, right? So that's important to keep in mind. And so when that exists, how do we accept each other with our differences instead of trying to change who the person is? Right? It doesn't mean you have to just go like, well, can't do anything about it, right? There is compromising. There is so many tools you can use to meet in the middle or, manage better, but you cannot change the person to become somebody else, right? You can meet in the middle, maybe adjust a little, but if someone just prefers the house to be clean all the time, then I can all of a sudden become like messy or just be okay with things on the floor, so then it becomes about like, how do we practice acceptance? How do we create the safe space where we can dialogue about our differences and maybe come up with compromises, even if they're temporary with each situation, But I think sometimes all of us are guilty of this, but really try to change the person. Like, see it my way. Why don't you see what I'm trying to tell you? Like,
and I think that's where it gets like where it has conflict, because I'm like, I'm trying to tell you, and he's like, I'm trying to tell you, and it's just we're like trying to change each other. And
then usually what happens is I might say things in a way that you might take as criticism, that you might get defensive, right? And then I'm like, yeah, you're not listening to me, and then we're both just flooded and overwhelmed. And that's also our physiology. We don't listen at that point when we're that emotional, when we're flooded. The parts of your brain that are in charge of processing information, problem solving, accessing humor, like they're offline. So it's really just two people yelling, or just literally talking and not being heard.
So then how do we go from, especially because like you said, 69% of the problems means that like you can't really change it, so especially like in our case, how do we move forward? Because I mean, I guess our plan was I feel like he needs to be a little bit more patient, and I need to be, better at communicating, I think, especially because I know with ADHD, it looks like I just have a trail of mess behind me, but I know I'm gonna get back to it, if I remember. But a lot of times, like I do, it's just I do it way later than someone like my boyfriend would do just right away.
Yeah.
And so I feel like my plan of action is just try to communicate that like I will get to it, you know. But I just think that he needs to be a little bit more patient with me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the first step is really to understand each other better in terms of what does this mean for you? Why is it important for you?
Yeah.
What does this remind you of? What's the longing and the wish behind this? Like, you know, and this goes on different examples, you know, finances, like one person being late, always that person being 15 minutes early everywhere.
Right.
One person's being a spender, that person likes to save money, right? These differences that exist, right? What does that mean to you? It's the biggest question. If you want your house clean all the time, right? What does that give you? It gives us something. It's not just because it's clean, right? Maybe it gives me a sense of peace. Maybe it gives me a sense of comfort, a place where I can relax, right? And that's kind of the significance of it, right?
Sure.
And what does it give you if you can just walk in and just, you know, put your clothes somewhere and not worry about everything needing to be clean? That's also, you know, significant. It gives you something, right?
Yeah.
So I think increasing and deepening that understanding of what this means for you and what does it mean for me can kind of soften things at first, when you're not thinking of your partner as like, oh, they're just so picky and they just like to nag, or they're just yelling at me. Do you see what I'm saying?
Literally all the
yeah. Yeah. So I think understanding needs to always come first before problem solving. I think we jump into problem solving very quickly.
Without trying to be like, okay, I get why he's, yeah. Because for me, I'm just like, why be so mad over dishes? You know, like why let that get to you? Why let get like just a little bit of mess just like upset him? Because I feel like it really like it makes him like so upset.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and for me, I would never get mad at anyone for not doing the dishes that day, you know, especially if like I work from home. So I'm always home. I'm, you know, and he goes to the office. I'm like, I've been working and living, and plus we have 2 cats, like, you know, like life is happening here.
Yeah.
So like, why get so upset? And maybe Bryan's here. Maybe he could chime in and like, is that like a trauma response?
I think for me, and I think this is like where I think we like miss the mark when we are arguing, is like, for me, I'm like, I understand that I'm very clean and I like the house very clean. So with that, I told her like, hey, I will assume most of the responsibility when it comes to cleaning the house, because I just want it to be a certain type of way. So I feel like it would be unfair to be like, I want it spick and span and clean, so get in the kitchen and knock it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to do that. So to me, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do all these other things and I'm going to just leave you the easy stuff, like that you can just do the dishes, do whatever you got to do. So to me, it's like when those little things aren't done, I'm like, well, damn, I'm doing everything else. Like, can't you just do the little stuff for me?
Yeah.
And I think it just kind of like piles up of just like, kind of like you said, like to me, I think it does mean so much more. And to her, it's just like, yo, it's a couple bowls and some cups in the sink. Like, why are you tripping? You know what I mean? For me, I'm like, but nah, like had a long day, sat in traffic. You want to come home, you want to chill, and you want to relax. So, you know, it's just like one of those things. Yeah. So I think for me, it's more of like a pile up. And even like when I've had conversations with my own therapist about like, maybe I'm not voicing stuff as I should in the moment. So then the dishes on top of whatever else I'm feeling is just adding on to it. So maybe like she's like, you flipping out over the dishes. And I'm like, it's not just the dishes for me though. You know what I mean? It may be a couple of things that I'm feeling that are coming out in that moment. So I feel like that's the biggest issue for me in those moments is the small thing kind of sparks a bigger argument over other things. Yeah.
Well, it's rarely about the small things. You know, it's not about the dishes, right? It's what dishes symbolize for you. It's what they mean for you, right? I know you hear couples argue about like the trash and the little things, right? And maybe early on in dating, that's not an issue because we go, oh, you know, they left the trash out, it's fine, you know. But that the 20th time, you're like, take out the dish, you know. So it makes sense, right? I think it's kind of looking at what is the significance underneath that, right? Like you said, you come home, long day at work, maybe it was stressful, maybe other things have been happening in life, right? And this clean house represents, you know, something, relaxation, a safe place to be, right? And then there is this person who's like, well, don't care about your safe place to be. Here it is, all the dishes, right? That's how we are taking it in.
Right.
Even though usually our partners don't mean it that way.
Of course.
You know, for them, it's like, it's 3 cups, it's fine. This is what relaxation means, not to have to worry about cleaning everything up, right? So again, just differences, not so much who's right, who's wrong, but can I accept myself as I am, and can I accept my partner for who they are, right? And then after that part is done, maybe we can look at a compromise. And I gotta say, when I'm saying compromise, people go, oh yeah, I'm a good compromiser, but most people don't really know how to compromise.
Yeah.
And
I'm feeling like it's challenging for me. I didn't realize
it's challenging
that.
for all of us. I had to learn the skill, right? Because I think what ends up happening is if you compromise in the wrong way, then one partner will end up feeling resentful, because they will feel like, I gave this up for you. I said, okay, fine, and then it will come out, because we might think we're doing the right thing by just, letting it go, but we're remembering it. We're not as nice as we think a lot of times, right? We're and so it will come out in different ways. I will be snappy in different ways and so on. And it all goes back to, when we are compromising, we cannot give up our core needs. That's the thing, right? If we give up our core needs, we're going to be resentful.
Yeah.
So the way to go around it is kind of look at, in this situation, what is one thing that I absolutely cannot give up? If I give this thing up, it's going to be me betraying myself. It's going to be me getting resentful with you. So, and it has to be like 1 or 2 things, 2 tops, usually 1, because we want to be more flexible, And once we know that one thing we cannot compromise on and give up, it has to happen, what are 10, 20, 30, whatever other things you can give up, you can compromise on, right? So each person gives up a lot of things to meet in the middle, but each person also knows what not to give up, the most significant thing for them, right? So for example, with the dishes, it could be, the dishes need to be done, right? I cannot have a pile of dishes. That's I will not be able to relax. But I'm flexible with, if you're hand washing it, if you're using the dishwasher, when it gets done, maybe we do it together, maybe, we have days, all these other options. That's one example, but just kind of finding what is that core need for each person is important.
Yeah. No, for instance, I think I hate putting the dishes away, but I don't mind washing it and putting it in the dishwasher. But I was like, if someone could just put it away.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, but I'm like, I don't mind washing it. That to me is fine. That's easy,
Yeah.
And I mentioned before, I love the smell of Dawn soap. So I kind of get obsessed when I'm washing it. But putting it back, I'm like, no.
We all have our things. I'm like that with laundry. I don't mind putting it in, but the folding...
Oh, that will take me a while. I'll take a nap before I get to that.
Yeah. I had a friend in college who just loves folding laundry and doing all those things that I just cannot stand.
Oh my God.
And she used to live next door to me. We're still best friends.
Yeah.
And I noticed that when she would come over, be over every day, it had laundry. She'd be like, oh, and then this happened. And as she's folding it away, just my laundry. And I'm like, you're folding my laundry? And she goes, I love folding laundry. And I'm like, you love folding laundry? You live next door. You're my best friend. So every time I would do laundry, I'd be like, hey, you want to come over?
Oh my God, that's perfect.
So we still joke about that. Obviously we're no longer roommates or anything, but that was, we all have
a good little compromise. It's okay, you like doing this, I don't like doing this, and maybe we'll just do that.
We still joke about it. Everyone used to call me because you want me to fold your laundry. I'm like, you liked it, so
that's kind of nice, actually.
Right? I
know. Wish both of us would like to fold laundry, so that's
And now she lives far. She has her own family, and I have mine, and I have lots of laundry with the kids. So not fun.
It's not fun at all.
No.
But yeah, going back to I guess the argument. So when he starts, saying how he feels about it, and I start, to be honest, I start getting triggered because I feel like damn, I'm not a good partner. I'm not, because the biggest insecurity that I've always had is that I'm not the cliche wifey material. I'm not someone who cooks and clean. I'm not I'm more of a career person, I guess you could say. So I'd rather just work all day than do laundry and do the dishes and clean or cook. And he's someone that cooks for us. He always, I don't think I could think of one time that I cooked for us. He always does the cooking.
It's been more than once.
It's been more than once? Okay.
For sure.
Fair. Once, so when he starts, getting upset with me, I get really defensive because my insecurities come out because I'm like, oh my God, I'm just like my I feel like it is my mom getting mad at me again, reminding me that I'm not good at this, you know? And so I start feeling like I'm failing him as a partner. And so I just like start like even right now, just even thinking about it, like it makes me cry like so like easy. I'm like, oh no, I suck. And I'm like, you're gonna leave. Like sometimes I even bring up like depending how, you know, rough the fight is, like I'll be like, he's gonna leave me. Like this is something he'd leave me for. And so then my abandonment issues start like coming up. Like I'm just thinking about it. I'm like it just makes me so sensitive. And it's like all because of like chores.
Yeah.
But then I like all my like traumas and triggers like start coming out. And he's like just sees it. And he's like, whoa, you know? So what do I do? Like, how do I go about this? You know?
So that would be something important to talk about, right? Like to understand each other deeply in terms of our triggers and past traumas. And, you know, when you say it like this, you know, I feel just like when I was, I don't know, a child and my mom used to do this. Can you say it like this instead so that my abandonment, you know, fears don't come out? Right? Because it's so normal. Like so many people have this. And I think in those moments we feel alone. Like, you know, oh no, I'm going to be left and something's wrong with me. Right. And it's a story. It's a story that we create and it has its origins. You know, it's possible that a lot of times when we have this abandonment fears, it's because it has happened to us. Doesn't mean our parents abandoned us, but it just means we felt that feeling before, right? Like if you don't clean, you know, mom is upset with you and that's rejection. And that's me feeling like you left me in that moment. That connection was disrupted. Right. So it's kind of like conditional sometimes, right? Like I have to do X, Y, and Z or my parent will reject me. Right. And then for a child, there is that it's a significant thing. So we all have a version of something like that, you know? And so that gets triggered with our partners.
For sure. Because I feel like when I was single, I was fine. Like I wasn't thinking about that because I'm just in my own world. If, you know, someone mentioned I didn't do dishes, I was like, whatever. But then when you're with the partner, you're like, well, I didn't realize I had this trauma. Like I knew I had like a rough relationship with my mom, but I didn't realize it would come out like this, you know? Because I feel like my mom and I's relationship is better now. Now that I've gotten older, I'm out of the house and I just accepted who she is. So I don't feel like I need to like do more work with that maybe, but at the end of the day, it's like I now need to like work on myself and like my reactions. And I like cry so easily about it. And I'm like, I didn't even think this was like something that was like painful, you know? But going back to what you said, just like even the feeling of like they didn't leave you, but just even that disconnect feels very abandoning. Because, you know, full transparency, like anyone with a Filipino mother, we know like they, you know, it was all about like hitting their kids and stuff. So I feel like, I mean, he's never hit me or even shown, you know, that he ever wanted to, but you know, going back to that like time as a kid, when you know, if I'm not doing the chores, I didn't clean up my room, like, oh my God, I would totally get beat up. So I think that definitely is just like I get really defensive.
Well, that makes sense, right? I think we forget that our body remembers things, you know, our mind remembers things. So we seek safety all the time and connection as human beings. And so if something is, you know, was hurtful, was dangerous, we're going to try to avoid it at all costs in the future, right? So, and there is no association of like, if you do X, you know, Y happens, right? So don't do that. And so in this relationship, it's normal that you would expect something bad happening. Maybe not a beating, but maybe like, I'm going to be left. My partner is not going to like me. I'm bad, right? So it just goes back to those like old narratives. And that makes sense. You know, the good news is this, that, you know, our most significant relationships are with our parents when we start out, because that's how we learn about the world, about connection with human beings. That's like the factory settings, right? Like we were just created that way at first. And then, you know, we have friends, which makes sense. You said you were single, you didn't care about these things, right? And then the most vulnerable relationship after the parents is usually our significant others, because where else are we that vulnerable, right?
For sure.
But the healing can happen with our partners as well, because if we can create safety, one that maybe we didn't have growing up, it's almost like exposure therapy in a way where you're just exposed to something different.
Yeah.
And at first you're like, oh no, I, voiced my needs and I said what I need and he's going to leave me, it's the end of the world. And then it doesn't happen. Oh, my partner is here and he's gentle and he, invites me to open up more. And he lets me know that it's not about me being that person, but it's about dishes and him being able to relax. So I'm not that person. It's this situation.
Right.
And just kind of builds on top of each other, in time where your body starts to relax, your mind starts to relax around it. And you're no longer like, trying to protect yourself and expect something bad to happen.
Yeah.
So relationships are so powerful, so powerful. I always say we get hurt and we get healed in relationships.
Oh, that's actually very beautiful because I feel like you're always kind of told like fix yourself before getting into a relationship, like be completely healed and this perfect like human being before you get into a relationship. And like I still stand by that to a certain extent, but then there's like certain triggers and stuff that you don't even realize until you're in it. And it is good to hear that there's like healing in that.
Yeah, we need safe people around us.
Yeah.
And I think I'm also like in the middle in terms of I think when they say like heal yourself before a relationship, I think that really means get more insight about what's happening and why you have triggers.
Yeah.
So you can seek those safer people and not repeat the patterns over and over again without realizing why you're doing what you're doing,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think sometimes, I mean, I'm sure you've experienced that, right? Even with strangers, sometimes you can meet someone, they make you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And sometimes someone might even smile and say the right things and you're just still on edge.
Right. Yeah. You just feel like your instincts.
Yeah. Like it's just something is unsafe about that person. Right. So that safety is just so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. Yeah. So I feel like, we, in our fights, we tend to, there's like an emotional kind of outburst that happens. And then, like I said, because it always feels kind of like danger, I always kind of have to like step away and, like last time I like went into, my office and just like wanted to be alone and just cry and just like get it out of my system, like get like teenage Steph just out of there before I, go back to my partner and like talk to him. But I know that comes off as like very dismissive, to him. And so, but then, after, and I feel like I do a good job. You could let me know. I do a good job of letting you know, like, I just need a moment. And then I come back just a few minutes later. And I feel like at that point we are a lot calmer.
Yeah.
And I think we do a good job of just being like, this is what I meant,
Yeah.
and then just trying to like figure out what the next steps look like and just I think we try to understand each other at that time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, but it's like, again, like it's one of those, like, we don't fight about anything else, but it's that keeps happening. And so when the last time that happened, it was like back to back, it was like once a week and then another week that happened again. Yeah. I was like, this is it kind of just sparked inspiration for the show because I was like, this is something I need to talk about because like I mean he's my first adult relationship that I've ever been in, so I'm like, this is like very I know a very common thing and very difficult thing to like, man, this is what they mean when they say relationships are hard.
Yeah. Well, I think all relationships, are gonna have some conflict. It's inevitable.
Yeah.
And I think it's important what you just said with taking a break and then coming back. When we are flooded, which means like our heart rate goes up, you might notice that you're sweating, your heart is beating fast, like all of those things, right? It usually, your heart rate will go over 100. And then if you notice that means you're flooded. And when you're flooded, you can't reason, you can't think logically, you can't access your humor, you can't connect, none of that. You can't problem solve. So it's really important to take a break and tell our partner like, hey, like, sounds like we're not managing this well right now, or we're flooded, whatever, short, right? You just want to say something, let them know.
Right.
Let's pause. Let's come back to it in, whatever time. You want to give the time so they don't feel abandoned.
Right.
Right. And usually it takes about 20 minutes at least to kind of regulate ourselves, if not longer. So you want to always give the time, then come back and make those repairs.
Right. I think my toxic trait is that I know when to do that, but when someone does that to me, I'm like, no, let's figure it out right now, and so I like tend to just tell the other person that I don't want them to like get, to have a minute, but then when I need a minute, I do it. And I feel like that's something that
that's
I'll
really
own up.
normal. We all do that. It's just not helpful, but we do it,
Right, yeah.
Because I think it's that anxiety, right? You feel like I need to resolve this now. I don't want to just, where does this go? I need to express myself. I need to fix this,
Yeah.
So it's important that those 20 minutes or however long you take, you use that for self-soothing activities, not just, I'm going to go in a different room and just think about all the things I'm going to say to win this argument or to prove my point, right? It's just, can I go and take a walk? Can I journal? Can I call a friend? Can I take a shower? Can I take a bath? Whatever, helps you kind of regulate down and be calmer. And then you can kind of continue that conversation.
Yeah.
Nice.
I love, this is like very helpful. Like I feel very like, I don't know, I just feel a lot better about the situation. Yeah. So maybe just to like briefly talk about your triggers, because I feel like, mine is I start to resort to teenage Steph and I start crying and feeling like I'm being abandoned or abused or whatever. But Bryan starts to feel like he's not being heard. And as a partner, I'm like, I feel like I'm trying to hear you out. And in those moments, I don't know what to do. And he starts like, sorry, not to put you on blast. But he's just it's just my fault. Fine. It's fine. I'll just do everything. It's just my fault. And he tries to just like end it and be like, whatever, it's fine. But I know it's like not okay. And I don't know what to do in those situations when he's like having a little tantrum.
Yeah. I think for me in those situations, it's like she said, as a kid, it was a lot of that where I would express myself. Like, I think that's why I just, as struggled as an adult to like express my wants and needs. Cause I feel like as a kid, when I did it, it was just kind of like either ignored or kind of dismissed or not really something that was acknowledged. You know what I mean? So I feel like that's something I struggle with. So I think that I do have such a strong reaction to it now of like, but I told you, like, you know what I mean? I explained. And I think for me, sometimes in our arguments, the part that gets tough is like, Steph be like, I know I didn't do it. I'm like, and I'm just like, but if you know, like, why you didn't do it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so sometimes it kind of triggers that of like, oh, I know you want it this way. I know you're going to be upset if it's not done that way, but kind of still like, yeah, I couldn't get to it type of deal. You know what I mean? It just feels like, so to me, it just kind of, I think it just triggers that like, oh, like you really just don't care like about when I'm asking for this thing. And you're just like, it's not a big deal to me. So whatever, I think it does trigger that where I've just had that experience with like step parents in my life where it just kind of like have made me feel like, oh, your wants and needs aren't my responsibility. So go figure it out. You know what I mean? Type of situation. So, and that's where I do get into that, like, I am very resourceful and can be very independent. I get that from that of just like, okay, I just got to figure out how to get all of this done by myself and like, let's do it. You know what I mean? So, and I know that for her, that's tough because that triggers her. Like, no, that makes her feel like she's not good enough because then I'm like, okay, fine. Well, I'll just do everything on my own.
I hate when he does
and
that.
she's like, well, no, like I want to, be able to contribute too. And then it's hard for me because I'm like, I'm asking you to contribute, but we're not getting to that space. So I think that's, those triggers just start butting heads. And we, like you said, like she said, when we get in those moments, it's tough because we're both just kind of like, we talk in circles. We'll do it for about a half an hour where we just go in circles of, I explain my point, she explains her point, and nobody like listens to each other, right? Because we're just explaining each other's points round and round and round until one of us is just like, this is not going nowhere. Like we take a moment.
Stop.
Let's take a moment and figure it out. So I think for me, that's a lot of what it is. And just that big trigger of like, just not feeling heard and not feeling like, being acknowledged. And then it almost makes it even worse to me sometimes when you do acknowledge it. And it's like, cause to me, again, my non-ADHD type A brain is like, oh, well, if you get it, then do it.
Yeah.
Like, it's just that simple to me. You know what I mean? But for her, it's so many other layers to that.
Yeah. And isn't that interesting, right? We just trigger each other's, childhood stuff, right? Being abandoned, not being heard, right? And then we just create these narratives like, so you're saying you know it, but you're not doing it. That means you don't care.
Yeah.
right? And so we react to what's here, not actually what's happening. We react to the stories we create about our partners of why they're doing certain things and what their motivations are.
So
and
true.
You know, instead of actually what's happening. And I think most of the time when we say, you're not hearing me, is that because they are responding to the story in their minds instead of actually what we're saying. So we keep saying it over and over again, like, hear me, I'm saying this, right? And I think when we're upset, it's, again, probably because we're flooded and we're not taking in that information. So we're not really hearing, right?
Yeah.
But I think if we understand that, like, hey, there's a story about this for you, right? Like, it might not be the same situation as your past, but it triggers the same kind of feelings, right? Of feeling not heard, feeling like I don't matter, like my needs are just not your issue, right? Then it can kind of soften things, you know, for our partner to go, oh, okay, this is why it's important for him or her. And it's not about this story.
Right.
This is what's actually happening. And how do I respond to this situation, right? But I think for that to happen, we need to kind of slow down and really hear those background stories of what is this for you, right? What does it bring up in you, before kind of problem solving.
Yeah.
Because like I said earlier, we just jump into like problem solving or, you know, talking over each other and not really listening.
Yeah, for sure.
Which so I think slowing down helps.
Yeah, I think that's an important step for us because I think too, again, just the way I work, I'm just like, I don't know. I notice it more and more being in a relationship with Stefanie of just how I am. Like, okay, A plus B equals C. We got a formula, then let's do it. You know what I mean? Like you say, I think to me, it's like, okay, we have these arguments, we come to a conclusion, and then there's a action of change, right?
Yeah.
To, like you say, where we trying to like jump right to the problem solving and to the compromise of, like you say, I don't think we've ever like, I think we know each other because we've had these deep conversations, but to like really understand each other, like where we're coming from in these instances when we argue, because it is so much deeper than you know, a litter box or the dishes or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So it is to be able to like deeply understand that. I know for me, it would make me not feel like, oh, she just doesn't care. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know, maybe for her it would help her see like, oh, he's not just like being an unreasonable asshole.
Yeah.
Like,
Not asshole, just unreasonable.
Well, I think one thing to remember is that, you know, and this is Dr. Sue Johnson's work, but she always said, you know, all arguments can be summed down to one issue, down one kind of underlying thing, right? And that is wanting to be cared for. Like the question is, will you be there for me? Can I count on you? Can I rely on you? Do you care about me? Like that's also really underneath the trash problems, the cat litter and the groceries and whatever else, the dishes, right? When even those little things happen, like you left the dishes there. It's interesting. It's about the dishes, right? But it really goes down to, you don't care about me, right? In that moment when we're hurt, we're like, if you care about me, you would do this, right? And same, right? Like you're arguing about 3 cups in whatever, right? Dishes. Like, do you not care about me? Like, why is that important? It just kind of for everybody goes back to that. Am I cared for? Can I rely on you? Can, you know, or not, right? So sometimes those little things can trigger that. And we tell ourselves a story of like, my partner doesn't care about me, when it's really not about that. It's not even about us. Right. It's about their childhood and what this means for them and what it gives them if there's, you know, dishes are done or anything else. Right? Yeah.
I love that.
That's the good news, guys.
No, that's great. I feel like we could conquer this. We could do this.
I thought we were just gonna have to hire cleaners.
That's another
that could be
I was like, man, we're just gonna have to like pay for cleaners.
That could be a compromise, you know?
Like, yeah. Sure, because you can't change each other. So just finding something that works for us. Amazing. And just one last question before we go. Like, what's just kind of a general tip for couples and relationships, and, you know, to make it a successful one?
Just one. Wow.
Or I mean, anything that you got to. I know it's very like whatever. Just kind of any advice for any couples out there for.
Well, I'll say that, you know, the most important part about any relationship is friendship. Actually, it's, you know, not because people say like, what's the most important thing in relationships? And I'm like, communication. That's kind of the go-to answer for most people, right? And that's important, of course, but it's friendship, because if you're good friends, you know, then it will help with communication too, because you like this person. You know that if they mess up, they didn't do it on purpose, most likely, right? couples have a hard time when they start seeing each other as the enemy, then it doesn't really matter as many, like how many skills they learn. You know, if I don't like you, if I think you're out there to get me, you know, if I think I'm better than you, right? Or whatever the situation is, but we're no longer friends, then I'm going to get irritated with you. I'm not going to, even with these tools, I'm going to just say it sometimes and not, you know. But if I really deeply think of you as a good friend for life, right? Then everything else can kind of fall into place easier.
Yeah.
You know, so definitely work on your friendship and that connection.
I love that. That's great advice because I feel like you're like my best friend.
For sure.
Oh, I love that.
Definitely.
So it's
That's
like,
so good.
I love that. Okay. Yay.
Awesome.
Well, I want to keep talking, but I feel like your time is up. So where can people find you and follow you on, you know, social media?
Yeah. So our website, www.mytherapycorner, all one word.com. Instagram, My Therapy Corner. Facebook, My Therapy Corner. Just everywhere, My Therapy Corner.
Like My Therapy Corner everywhere.
Just Google that. Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. And then you guys, you know what it is. Follow me, Stefanie Maegan, or go to brocotherapy.com. All that shit is there. Love you. Bye.
Growth therapy.